Welcome into the Sources A podcast, your go-to Kentucky basketball podcast on the KSR Podcast Network, presented by Club Blue. Club Blue is the official collective partner of the University of Kentucky. I am your host, Jack Pilgrim of Kentucky Sports Radio. Very excited to be joined once again by Sean Smith. Sean, how the heck are you?
You already know the answer. I'm fantastic, Jack. How are you?
I'm doing great. I'm doing great. We're, definitely in the weeds of summer basketball, kind of just hanging on to every little nugget news item that comes from the Joe Kraft Center, whether it's, talking to Jalen Lowe and Reese Potter like we did today, or, just kind of the intel and behind the scenes stuff that kind of leaks from the Joe Kraft Center this time of year, where we kind of get a feel, pulse for what we should be expecting this upcoming season for the 2025-2026 roster. But kind of, wanted to do something a little bit different today, and I'm very excited to do this. Connected on KS Board of all places. See, this is why you should subscribe to KS Board, so we can create magic like this, because it was a very unlikely encounter with my guy Spencer Smith of Synergy Sports, who reached out on KS Board, and we just kind of decided to kind of turn this into a thing. Very excited to bring him on. 10 years of Division I coaching experience in college basketball, but now with Synergy Sports. Spencer, glad to have you on, and kind of pick your brain a little bit and dig into the weeds of Kentucky basketball.
Yeah. Hey, thrilled to be here. I told Sean shortly before, I said, this is kind of like meeting a couple of local celebrities, because I've been watching you guys on and off for a couple of years now, which has been super fun ever since I kind of got out of, the coaching side of it. I've been watching you guys, and Jack, you're a Shelby County guy now, and I've got a lot of family and stuff there, which is pretty cool. So I'm thrilled to be here. I'm channeling my inner Jack Pilgrim, I think, with this jacket. I dug this out.
My guy, you look stunning. You look amazing.
I figured I would, go all out for it being my first time. So I appreciate you guys having me on. I'll try to give any insights that I have. I can talk a little bit about myself, and we'll talk about the Cats.
Yeah, that sounds awesome. So just a little backstory, just loosely, very surface level, a decade in Division I level, spent a year at the University of Kentucky working on the equipment side on the championship 2011-2012 team of all teams. So that's definitely something that we're excited to dig into a little bit. And just beyond that, just so many cool connections and different coaches you've worked for, coaches you've gone up against, just so many different, cool little storylines that we'll dig into. But I think the fans will definitely appreciate your insight and what you bring to the table in terms of, roster building, roster construction, what that looks like, and how we kind of got to where we are today with this Kentucky roster, and kind of what we should expect going into this season. And what fans always want to know is, can this team win it all? How good can they be? How do you like the setup of where they came from? Some of those sorts of things in the build. So a lot of cool things like that. But start just kind of surface level Synergy Sports, like no longer in coaching, but now kind of on the analytics side. Just what does your kind of day-to-day look like right now?
Yeah, I'm doing a few different things now. I've moved into a couple different roles at Synergy, which has been fun. It started because when I got out of coaching, it was around COVID, and I knew the guy who founded Synergy, and I hit him up. He had been our account rep when I was at Oklahoma, and I was just like, hey, is there any way to get involved at Synergy on the side? I'm deciding to get out of coaching. I don't know exactly what I want to do, but Synergy would be great. Like if I can kind of get involved, even if it's like part-time or whatever. So he started me out saying, well, hey, why don't you come and work with our like client success team? Just help our clients out, help them make edits. So I was like, sure, this sounds great. This sounds excellent to me. It sounded really easy, way to kind of get my foot in the door and stuff. And I started doing that, and I got to work with coaches D3, D2, all the way up to D1. Media members, I'm talking like some of the bigger ones that you hear on ESPN and stuff would be randomly calling in like, hey, I'm trying to put this together. I'm doing the Duke, North Carolina game next weekend. Like I'm trying to put this together. Like, can you help me out? So a lot of that type of stuff, and it kept me connected. It also gave me an opportunity, to meet more people in the business, which was really fun. It also gave me an opportunity to catch up with people that I hadn't talked to. I'm like, oh yeah, you're so-and-so from West Virginia. I remember, at the Big 12 tournament, I remember every year we used to catch up. So there was a lot of that type of stuff, which was really fun. Now I'm working a little bit more actually with the APIs. So more with like the media members directly. So ESPN, CBS, Yahoo, doing like our live analytics and our live stats that Synergy offers. It all feeds right to ESPN.com and CBS and that type of stuff. So I'm actually helping on that side of the business now, more so than coaching. Still get to be directly related to basketball, which is great. I still get to work with a lot of the same people, which is really fun. But Synergy is kind of growing like crazy. And for anybody that doesn't know what Synergy is specifically, it is probably the number one film exchange kind of server, definitely in college basketball, but they also service the NBA and they service Major League Baseball, and they do a lot of other sports as well. But any college basketball coach in America, D3, D2, D1, even high school, like they're a lot of times living on Synergy, and that's how they're getting ready for games. So being involved with that's been really fun.
So going way back, your day one, I feel like as a basketball fan and what you're going to go to the grave with, I feel like your 1 year at Kentucky, winning a national championship, kind of being a behind the scenes person. What was that like, being day one, starting your kind of career and seeing greatness, kind of from the beginning? I feel like it kind of set an unrealistic expectation for you of I just walk in and win national championships. This stuff is easy.
Yeah. So my expectations are already unrealistic because I grew up a Kentucky fan, right? So like I already have the most unrealistic of expectations just in general for my teams. But yeah, I went to Kentucky and basically I was trying any way to get plugged in with the team. And at the time they were like, look, we don't have any spots like directly like doing exactly what you want to do. But I had a connection with a guy named John Denaio, who I believe is still there. He was great to me. And he runs like all of the equipment at UK. So all the sports answer to John when it comes to, equipment related things and getting teams what they need and stuff. And I had a connection with him through kind of a third party. And anyways, John kind of took me in. He was like, hey, we'll make this work however we can. He was like, why don't you come work directly for me? And I'm going to put you in the Joe Kraft Center as much as I possibly can. So I was like, great, this sounds excellent. So pretty much every day I was getting to run over to the Joe Kraft Center to do whatever it was that he could come up with me to do, just so that I could get my foot in the door, be around the team as much as I could. And it was really, really fun. So I was a very, very background member of that whole operation. I got to do the very littlest of things, but it was really, for me, growing up a UK fan, to now having like key card access to the Joe Kraft Center and getting, just walking down the hallway and, oh, there's Coach Cal and there's, oh my gosh, it's Michael Kidd-Gilchrist. Like that for me, I was fanning out like no other. I thought I was just living the dream, which I was. And I got to do it at a really interesting time because it was during the NBA lockouts. We had a lot of those guys that were kind of coming in, and I got to just kind of randomly be around some of them, which was fun. So I literally did anything and everything. I'm talking, I was doing laundry sometimes for some teams at like midnight, if it meant that I could just spend a little bit more time in the Joe Kraft Center and stuff and being around some of those guys in that team. And I met people that year that I still talk to today, which is great. And to something that we'll maybe talk about later, it set me up for a job later in life, which was the whole point. I was able to use one of those connections later in life to help me get another job in basketball later on. So it was really, really fun. Definitely the highlight for me as a Kentucky fan. It was like, that's like the dream. You know what I mean?
What is the craziest thing you saw that season? I guess kind of a moment where you were like, okay, I'm around greatness, pretty obviously around greatness. This team is capable of winning the whole thing. And I can kind of say, I'll be able to tell my grandkids one day that like, hey, I witnessed kind of the beginning stages of a national championship contender, then become an actual national champion.
I think pickup in the fall that I got to kind of be there for and watch and stuff was really fun because I think it really set the tone. It was like, hey, this team is unreal. They competed harder than I think anybody had ever seen compete in anything, and I'm like, this is just a Thursday afternoon pickup game. Like we don't even have like you guys don't even have workouts today. You're just playing pickup. So that part was really, really fun. I got to, probably the most starstruck moment for me, because early on, like Anthony Davis wasn't Anthony Davis yet and stuff. And, so anytime I got to interact with him, the little bit that I did, it was, it felt a little bit more normal because he wasn't who he is now. There was a day where I very stupidly, I'll tell this story. My last couple of years of high school, we adopted the Cleveland Cavaliers logo as like kind of one of our things. You know how high schools do. They take like a pro logo and just make it their own. So we had taken the Cleveland Cavaliers logo, and one day around the Joe Kraft, I was wearing that. I was just kind of wearing an old high school shirt, but it just had the big Cavs logo in the middle. This is a 100% true story. I'm walking around down there, whatever. I think I settled into the equipment room back right off of the court, and I'm doing something. I was helping the head equipment guy's name was Bo at the time, and I think I was helping Bo with something real quick. But anyways, all of a sudden there had been a little more commotion around the building that day, but I didn't know why. I'd kind of just gotten there. And all of a sudden, back in the equipment room, in walks LeBron James, just like randomly on like a random Tuesday in September. and you're in Lexington, Kentucky, and you're like, what on earth is going on? Like, why is LeBron here? And is that like a mirage? Like, what's going on? And I'm just sat in the corner. And then I realized, like, oh my God, he thinks I'm wearing a Cleveland Cavalier, because this is right after he went to Miami. So things were heated at the time, I think, between the city of Cleveland and LeBron. And I was like, here I am just wearing a Cleveland. He thinks I'm wearing a Cleveland Cavaliers shirt. So I kind of tried to hide my shirt a little bit, but to his credit, I actually got to meet him. He actually came up and introduced himself to me, which is really nice. So I got to kind of shake his hand and like, you know, kind of meet him or whatever. That was like a big moment where I'm like, oh my God, I'm not just in Lexington. This is like a small version of Hollywood right now with like, you know, the talent and stuff that was coming around for NBA lockout and stuff. So that part was really fun. Yeah.
You should have just embraced it and just kind of like gone heel on him and said, "Hey, you don't belong in the same gym as me anymore, LeBron. Kick rocks. You're in Miami now. You don't belong. This is Cleveland Cavalier territory. You need to go to South Beach. Get the hell out of here, LeBron."
Secretly, because I'm from Florida originally, secretly I was really happy about it. And I was like, yeah, you know,
LeBron.
like, this is really cool. Like I didn't grow up a Heat fan. I grew up a Magic fan, but I was like, oh, I'll adopt him. I'm from Florida. So I was full bandwagon at that time. And he was great. He was super, super nice. Everybody in Lexington during that year treated me incredible, even though I was such a lowly part of just the equipment, just doing stuff super, super behind the scenes. Everybody treated me with like incredible respect and stuff, which is a testament, I think, to the program and stuff and the guys that were around and stuff. It was a really, really good time. Yeah.
Did you happen to see any of the pickups? You know, I think just the story that lives in infamy now with OKC walking in and, you know, Marcus Teague running his mouth and saying, you know, we as Kentucky, and then getting destroyed immediately afterward. Did you get to see any of those kind of pickups or with the OKC team in?
It's a sore spot for me, but I did not. It was very much
brutal.
It was very much at that time when those guys were in the gym. I think they were very much like on a need to know basis. Like if you need to be in there, great. If you don't, like get out. We don't need, you know, because it was chaotic, you know, all the people that wanted to be around. So I did not actually get to see any of those pickup games as much as I would have wanted to. I heard about them all the same, but I did not actually get to witness them, sadly. No.
Sean, do you have anything you would jump in?
Yeah, I was just going to say, you know, Spencer, from my time in basketball, you mentioned how an opportunity at Kentucky led to other opportunities through relationships. Is it amazing to you just how big the basketball world is, but when you actually kind of look at it, it's a small circle of people that you can connect with, and how a relationship here can lead to this. And then 5 or 6 years later, something else comes of just knowing someone or having one interaction or two with someone.
It's unbelievable. To this day, I can't really put it into words for people, like, you know, just kind of out and about, because you're right. It is such a big world, but it's so small at the same time because people move around so often, you know. So I look around at the guys that I worked with at like Oklahoma, for instance, or then early at South Florida, later at South Florida. They're all over the place. I've got some that are now in the NBA, some that have gone to high school, some that are working at other D1 schools. And when you're trying to get a job, like, who you know is currency. It's like, it's everything. It's really, really difficult, if I'm being honest, at least in my experience, to get a job if you don't have some sort of an in, because it's also a really finite space where it's like, there are only so many jobs. You know, there's only 320 something Division I teams. And that sounds like a lot, but it's really not. Some of those staffs only have 4 or 5 staff members. Some have 10 or 12, but it's like, you're dealing with 3,000 or 4,000 people, maybe total, that work in this industry across Division I, like on the coaching side. And it's really hard to kind of get in and get a job if you don't know somebody. So I got really lucky with a couple of happenstances and meetings, and things paid off a little bit later down the line for me, which was great. Some of it was just dumb luck, which was also really nice. But yeah, you're right, Sean. It's such a small world. And like, when a job opens up, you know, 150 guys with maybe better resumes than you are also applying. And one of them's from Tennessee, and Rick Barnes is calling for him. Because Sean, I know you interact with them. You know, one of them's at Indiana, and at the time Archie Miller's calling for him or something. And you know, you're going up against that kind of stuff. And so it's really, really hard to get in. But if you know somebody, it goes a long way. And that definitely paid off for me, at least in 1 or 2 instances.
You have your stretch at Oklahoma, but, you know, I think Kentucky fans with the Orlando Antigua connection is one that will definitely kind of resonate with them. Just what was that like, and how did kind of 1 + 1 = 2 being at Kentucky while Orlando Antigua is there lead to, you know, your time at South Florida?
Yeah, first of all, my time with Orlando was great. He was great to me. He was really, really, Orlando is just a great person, at least in my experience. All the interactions that I've had with him, Orlando was really, really great to me. I was just a young guy, young pup. I think he would call me young pup. I was just a young pup at the time. And he went out of his way to make sure that like I felt included and stuff, in even bigger coaching conversations that maybe I didn't feel comfortable, like day one, inserting myself in, like day one on a new job, maybe want to overstep. You don't really know what those boundaries are sometimes with the head coach. He was really, really great. My time at Kentucky, I got to meet him, more than a few times. So obviously, I got to spend time with him more than a few times, which was great. I didn't interact with the coaches a ton because they were the coaches and I was an equipment guy. So it's like, what are we going to talk about a ton? But again, like just in the interactions of day to day, like you're just kind of randomly interacting and stuff. And when the job opened up at South Florida, the job was for what's called either a video coordinator or director of scouting. Some programs call it one, some programs call it the other. That's what I was applying for. So we were at Oklahoma. We were coming off of a Final Four. When that happens, a lot of people tend to get jobs. So I was like, maybe this is my time to strike. I'm from Tampa originally. So this has just seemed like, okay, this is meant to be. All right. I grew up a huge Kentucky fan. I was at Kentucky with Orlando and with Rod Strickland, Rod Strickland was on staff USF at the time. Now I'm coming off of a Final Four with Oklahoma and that was great. And I'm from Tampa and they're working in Tampa and this job that I'm super qualified for just opened up on the coaching staff. Like this is perfect. And it all just kind of came together. And I think it was really down to me and one other person. I never really found out who that one other person was, but I know it was somebody with obviously probably great credentials and stuff as well. I was able to kind of use the Kentucky connection a little bit, which helped me stand out a bit more. I had Lon Kruger, who's a Hall of Famer, calling for me. I had some other coaches calling for me. Random connections, like one of our assistant coaches on staff, Steve Henson, and Orlando, Antigua went way back. Like they had known each other for like 30 years. So I'm looking at our associate head coach, like Coach Henson, you're my guy. I need you right now. I need you to call. That's how jobs happen in college basketball. So he had me to campus, interviewed me, gave me the campus tour, and it led to an offer pretty quick after that, which was great. And my girlfriend at the time, now wife, loaded up. We moved to Florida, and I hit the ground running with Coach Antigua. I got hired in like late July, so I didn't get the full summer with the team, which was kind of a bummer. But we just kind of jumped right into it, and I was ready to rock and roll, which was really fun.
How much of those Kentucky days carried over to that at South Florida? Like some of the things that Coach O would do, was it a lot of similarities in approach to how he teaches the game?
A ton. I noticed honestly not a whole lot of difference between even like play calls, even stuff that we were running. Was really a lot of the same. It really mirrored what we were doing. Our defensive coverage, being in the gaps, that type of stuff was all really similar. It all kind of came from that lineage, I think. And at South Florida, I mean, I don't say this in a bad way. We obviously didn't have the talent that Kentucky had. Coach O was coming off of that 2014 team with the twins and Julius Randle and all that kind of stuff. That was his last year. He had been coming off of that. So yeah, it was really the same type of system. Even the structure of the practices, I think, was really similar to what Cal had been doing at Kentucky. So a lot of that carried over. And I think that's very typical. And Sean, maybe you can chime in on that as well. But even on any ranks, like, when you spend a long time with a particular head coach and then you sprout off and kind of start doing your own thing, I think you adapt a lot of the tendencies and a lot of the things that you learned from your previous stop. And I think Coach Antigua did actually a pretty good job of that. Yeah.
Yeah, you do. I've noticed that as well, that it's you blend it kind of together. You take what you got here, you take what you got from this stop, and then it kind of becomes, what you're going to implement and plan.
Yep.
So that experience, you get to be on the bench with a lot of cool people, but you get to be against on opposing benches against really, really cool people as well. And I kind of want to save the Pope side because obviously that's, it deserves its own, kind of segment. But, Tubby Smith, Dan Hurley, Scott Drew, Kelvin Sampson, Bill Self, Tom Izzo, Jay Wright, Bob Huggins probably is, massive of a list and, the biggest names of the sport. Just kind of your favorite stories, individual moments that jumped out, just being on the opposing bench from those guys and kind of getting to pick their brain from afar, being in the same building as them, watching them coach from, up close and personally. Yeah,
I think Sean can attest to this as well. I think I learned more about basketball, not in practice, not in sessions, even like in our staff meetings with the head coach or whatever. I learned the most basketball when I was preparing for another team. because that was my main role. Like I was the director of scouting at South Florida. I was kind of I did that in an assistant type of role at OU. Like that was my job at both spots. It was like, hey, we're going to prepare for this other team. Like, let's go. I learned more about basketball from just preparing scouts against opponents than I even did within our own program, because you just get to look at so many different ways to make things happen, right? To be successful. Kelvin Sampson, from a coaching philosophy standpoint, could not be more different than like a Penny Hardaway, for instance. And they were in the same league, and I got to prepare for those types of games back to back. Specifically, I did get to go against Coach Pope, which was really fun. As a little trivia, and if I ever talk to him again, I will probably quiz him on this. I'm sure he remembers. But our game against them when I was at South Florida this was when he was at Utah Valley. It was his final game ever at Utah Valley. We knocked them out of the what was called the CBI at the time, which was a postseason tournament. We knocked them out of the CBI, which I think was the quarterfinals. It would have been, must have been. And that was the last game Coach Pope ever coached at Utah Valley. He was announced as the head coach at BYU just maybe a week and a half later. It went pretty quick after they got knocked out. I remember the scout against Coach Pope pretty well because it was a postseason scout. So we were, everybody was kind of all in and everything. We kind of went even the extra mile, even more so than we would do in the regular season. And I remember it was really difficult to prepare for because they didn't have like incredible athletes. They didn't have just guys that jump off the page and you're like, oh my gosh, this guy's a pro. But the way that he utilized the talent that he had, the way that he put them in position to be successful, he had guys that were just very like surgeon-like, right? With his med school background, like just right in the right spot at the right time, all the time, able to make a good play, which was really, really fun. And the head coach that I worked for at the time, his name's Brian Gregory. He's actually now the general manager of the Phoenix Suns, and just drafted Kobe Barea, which is also a fun fact. But that's who I worked for. He was my head coach at the time. He's like an obsessive preparer because he comes from the Tom Izzo tree. And I remember him preparing for Coach Pope in Utah Valley, I think, had him pulling his hair out a little bit because it was just so specific and there was just so many different ways to go with our coverages and stuff. And so with Coach Pope specifically, it was really, really fun to prepare for. I think the next toughest coach to prepare for was honestly Coach Hurley. They run about 1 trillion things. And I mean, they run 1 million different types of actions, which is so hard to prepare for. And again, for Brian Gregory, who's kind of an obsessive preparer in the best way, again, it was us pulling our hair out a little bit because we wanted to nail every single coverage. And it was like, okay, are we going to hedge this one? Are we going to try to ice it? Can we get there in time? What if we just flatted it? Like, how about a drop coverage here? Like, no, he's going to smoke us if they do that. Or like SMU did a drop coverage and they killed them because they kept throwing the lob. Just like 1 million types of things. And Coach Hurley puts his teams in a position where they can just do 1 million different things off of the actions that he runs. So watching them from afar was honestly, like I said, where I learned the most. And yeah, I think to kind of round it out, I think the star-studded part for me was going up against Tubby Smith. I got to go up against him when he was at Texas Tech, when I was at OU, when I was on the bench at OU, and then also when he was at Memphis, I was at South Florida. So I got to see Tubby twice, kind of in 2 different areas. And so we got to go against Tubby 5 or 6 times, maybe total. He was great. I got to meet Donna, which was like,
Queen,
star-studded moment. That was huge for me. Like meeting Donna in the stands. That was awesome.
That's go for it, Sean.
I'll ask you this. So, you've obviously got to see coaches from all eras of the game, right? Guys that have been in it for decades, guys that are, more of the modern era of what coaching and basketball looks like. What do you think has been the biggest change in the game of basketball from when you started at Kentucky till now? And how that is kind of just the way that it's kind of transformed offensively, defensively, the language, it's just everything. There's a lot of changes in it.
The language is funny to me because Sean, the language always seems to change. And, they call things Carolina action or something. And I'm like, Carolina didn't invent, you know what I mean? So it's like the language to me has always been funny on what people call things. But I actually like that it's becoming a little bit more standardized, which is kind of nice. The biggest change, I think, is just spacing. And Sean, you probably kind of can attest to this and stuff too. Like, on the circuit and all that kind of stuff, everybody's just interested and obsessed with spacing. I think if you go back and watch film from 2010, 2011, 2012, it wasn't that big of a thing. It was big. Like, don't get me wrong, everybody wants spacing, but it wasn't like, hey, let's just spread the entire floor. Let's have 5 guys that can really shoot the basketball. It wasn't really like that at the time. I think my time at Oklahoma, was actually, we were a little bit on the forefront of that. Not that we invented it or anything, because we didn't. I think the Warriors probably take the most credit for that. But like in the college basketball side of things, I think Coach Kruger was an early adopter of that. And we shot a bunch of threes. We had Buddy Hield, we had Jordan Woodard, we had Isaiah Cousins, Ryan Spangler. We had a bunch of dudes who could just shoot the ball. And we were really, really interested in just getting the ball up, and like we played really, really fast. I think we were second in the nation in scoring 2 years in a row. So I got to kind of be a part of that transition around that time, during in basketball, which was really fun. But I think that's the biggest thing, is just like spacing, shooting everywhere, having 5 men who can do it all, like an Amari Williams, even though Amari couldn't quite shoot the ball, but like he could do a little bit of everything else that like you're like 15 years ago. No 5-man could do that. Now it's just kind of run of the mill in today's game. So I think that's probably the biggest thing.
What was Buddy Hield mania like? Living that, existing in that kind of realm where just he explodes as the biggest name in college basketball that year?
It was really fun. I got to be with Buddy from the beginning. He and I were together his very first summer there when he was a scrawny little 3-star kid from the Bahamas. Who he talked so fast that nobody could understand him. It was like we needed subtitles at the bottom in real life. Buddy, you gotta calm down, because he had the accent. He talked really fast. He called everybody Daddy-O. Hey, Daddy-O, what's up, Daddy-O? So you never knew who he was talking to. You're like, who are you talking to right now? You just, there's 12 people in the room. I don't know who you're talking to. He was really, really fun, and watching like him grow and getting to be there for that was really, really fun. And yeah, he became the National Player of the Year and a top 6 or 7 pick, whatever pick he went. That was really fun. Campus in Oklahoma at the time was like, we had Baker Mayfield, we had Kyler Murray, we had Buddy Hield. Shortly after that was Trey Young. I mean, that was like a hotbed of kind of stars at the time in college sports, which was really fun. But being there with Buddy for all 4 years, watching him get drafted, that was special. That was something that for me, like being along for the whole ride, I don't know if I probably won't ever get to do that again. It's kind of a once in a lifetime thing. And it was really fun.
So transitioning back to Pope and kind of the today, how have you seen from, the scout against him versus kind of following and being a fan of the program now? How have you seen him evolve individually as a coach, and kind of the actions he runs, and just the, how he has adapted year after year?
Yeah, he's definitely more focused on 3-point shooting now. And again, it's hard because it's hard with a coach as good as what I think Coach Pope is, because I think Coach Pope is incredible. I think from like a tactician standpoint, I think Coach Pope is really, really good, and it's really fun to watch. And I think it's hard to say, because at Utah Valley, Coach Pope is again somebody who he's going to play to his strengths. And at Utah Valley, they had very particular strengths based on their personnel, and he did just an absolutely incredible job. Now, if you took Kentucky's roster and put him on Utah Valley that year, he probably plays totally different, right? And I think the transition that he's made into BYU and getting slightly better athletes and getting kind of slightly higher talent level, and then they made the move to the Big 12, and he just did an unbelievable job in his first year at the Big 12. Coming full circle, now he's back at Kentucky, coaching a team that, had its issues, had its problems, had its glaring kind of roster gaps and stuff like that, but still like incredibly impressive for how quickly they put the roster together. But I think his philosophy has also come full circle, where he's like, look, I'm coaching the best of the best, so we're going to play a system that is best of the best, which is prioritizing spacing, threes, really opening the floor up, everybody being able to do a little bit of everything. I really like we'll talk about this maybe a little bit later on, so I won't touch on this a ton right now, but I really like his approach to roster building so far. I think it gives us a really unique opportunity to win games that maybe otherwise would be tougher to win in certain situations. So I really like the roster building aspect. I'm blown away that Coach Pope is so young and he's already this good, because I'm like, in my mind as a Kentucky fan, I'm like, this guy's going to be here for 30 years. He's never leaving. He's going to win 10 titles here, because I'm an unrealistic Kentucky fan. That's kind of
so are we. That's why we're here.
I've convinced myself of that, but I just think like he's already grown so much, in my opinion, as a coach. Like, so just more and more time with this level of athlete and stuff. I just think for him, it's going to be the sky's the limit. Last thing I'll add to that, you can see similar type of growth with Coach Hurley. Coach Hurley at UConn. Again, he played to his strengths at Rhode Island, which was really, really good. But then you saw his time at UConn. And just being honest with you, when we were at South Florida, his early years at UConn, we were beating them a few times. I think we beat UConn maybe 3 times, maybe 4. I don't quite remember. We got some wins against UConn, lowly South Florida. And then you look at what he's developed now. I think it's the same thing. Hurley's just gotten better and better and better as he's like gotten better talent and stuff. And I think Coach Pope is going to have a similar type of trajectory. Yeah.
And you said it earlier, you really get the familiarity with coaches when you scout them and you put that scouting report together. More so, maybe things that you don't pay attention to unless you're having to dive into tape. So, having that scout and having pulled apart what Mark Pope does, did you maybe have a little bit more confidence in that initial news that he was hired as the head coach at Kentucky than maybe some other people didn't have, just because of the familiarity that that he knows the game at a deep level?
Yeah, I'm like any Kentucky fan where I also got wrapped up in the Hurley mania, and I was like, come on, we can do this, And I do think if we had hired Hurley, just being honest with you, I think that would have been a guaranteed title. I think maybe 2. I think he would have been NBA drama almost every summer like Cal was. And I think, eventually he probably would have left for an NBA job and it would have been a little bit short-lived. But then when I heard Pope's name thrown out there, I think it was John Rothstein tweeted it. In my mind, I was like, well, that can't be right. I don't think he's ready for that. But then to your point, Sean, I think the more I thought about it, I was like, well, hold on. He was really damn hard to scout against. And he is really, really impressive what he's doing at BYU, because I would watch him at BYU and stuff too. And the more I thought about it, the more it made sense to me. So I think I came around to the idea quicker than others did. I think within a day or so, I was all in. I was like, this is going to be great. This guy's the right man for the job. I was drinking the Kool-Aid at that point, even though I did get caught up in the Hurley mania a little bit. But yeah, I have full confidence that Pope is the right guy for the job. I think he's going to do an unbelievable job.
We'll dig in more to the specific roster and then things like that in a second. But before then, Club Blue is the official collective partner of the University of Kentucky. Club Blue was founded by UK fans strictly to support the NIL efforts at the University of Kentucky. Unlike most collectives, 100% of subscriber money, 100% of donor money goes directly to NIL. Club Blue charges no fees. Club Blue subscribers receive some amazing benefits like invitations to special events, meet and greets with UK athletes, signed merchandise, monthly giveaways, ticket giveaways, Club Blue merch, and more. Subscribe today at www.clubbluenil.com. You can pick which sport you want to support when you sign up. Choose your sport and support with Club Blue. I guess let's go back to last year. You talked about just how quickly all of that unfolded in the roster construction. He's, 2-3 weeks later than the rest of the party and still, manages to go to Sweet 16 first time since 2019, all those things, making history, top 15 wins. How was he able to overcome maybe the talent deficit, a talented group, but not NBA talent, turned Amari and Kobe into NBA talent, but you get what I mean. Kind of exceeding those expectations in year one with the roster building side of things and your familiarity with that.
Yeah, I think when the roster was put together, I remember, I think I was talking to my uncle, who is also a Shelby County guy. Shout out to Keith Morgan.
Shout out.
Shelby County. I think I was talking to my uncle, and I think I told him at the time, I was like, I think I see a 6 seed or a 7 seed with this group. This is before the season. I was like, just looking at the talent. I think we're like, there were some people that were like, I just hope we make the tournament. And I was like, let's not do that. Like, come on. Like, this team is good enough to make the tournament comfortably. But I think I saw middle of the pack, 6 to 7 seed is what I looked at. I think from like an execution standpoint, similar to what he did at Utah Valley and what I saw when I watched him at BYU, I just think he just is so good at putting guys in a position to be successful. And I just saw guys always in the right spots to make the right play. They knew the play that they needed to make. A guy drives baseline. You got Andrew Carr stepping up in the paint. You know what I mean? He's on the block, posting up. A guy drives baseline. You see Andrew Carr going to like the middle of the rim, kind of stepping up in the paint, like ready for a drop off. You saw it every time. I just think he did a really, really good job of making guys understand where they needed to be in order to be successful, putting them in the right spots, and then running stuff that like maximize their potential. I also just think from an in-game adjustment standpoint, I think Coach Pope did an unbelievable job. I think we made changes on the fly that were really, really impressive. And in wins or losses that we had, again, even the losses, I didn't quite see other programs making as impactful of adjustments as Coach Pope made, which was really, really great to see. I think that was a point of frustration for some fans at times, where it's kind of like, we're defending this ball screen the exact same way against Texas A&M in the SEC tournament, and Wade Taylor's just crushing us over and over again. Like, what are we doing? And I just think, like, for Coach Pope, I just think he did a masterful job of making adjustments in game to kind of put ourselves in the best position to succeed. The Duke game is probably the best example of that. Like, from a talent standpoint. Those two teams were had a little bit of distance between them, but obviously, like, again, you saw the result. So I think those are the two things. Sean, I mean, I think you've talked about this a little bit before, but what was there anything for you that stood out?
I think that the biggest compliment that I can give Mark Pope is he's the best coaches to me are the ones that are intentional with what they want to do, and especially offensively. And I feel like that Pope is so good at putting guys in spots to have success and kind of manipulating those actions and things. And I thought that he didn't necessarily have the pieces that he wants to have to do everything in his system that he wants, but I thought that he manufactured success with what he had. And a lot of it because of just how intentional he is at finding success on the offensive end of the floor. Where this team, I think, is going to have a lot more success in being able to do some of those things that he wants to do at an elite level. But I thought he was able to show the ability to adapt and to adjust, which I think are very important to being successful at this level of college basketball. And I think that that's what gives you the most confidence that when the talent gets better, that you have even more success, because you know how intentional he's going to be to put these guys in the spot to where you're not as handcuffed with some things that they were handcuffed with this past year.
I totally agree. I think later in the year you saw it, because obviously we all know we got better defensively as the year went on. And that's how it should be, right? If a team is not getting better as the year goes on, like, maybe there's a problem. You know what I mean? Like, you're in practice every day. You're doing your coverages. Like, you should be getting better as the year goes on. But defensively, this team took a big step forward, obviously, as we know in February and March. Really good example of that on both sides would be like later in the year, the Missouri game and the Oklahoma game in the SEC tournament. Both of those games, we changed up our ball screen coverage a few different times throughout the game, masterfully. Sometimes because it wasn't working, because, hey, Fears from Oklahoma is kind of carving us up right now. Let's switch it up. Let's try this. Let's try that. To try to throw him off balance, because right now he's comfortable. He knows what's coming every time he comes off the screen, so he's comfortable. He knows what he's going to do because it's working for him. That's like the year before with Wade Taylor. He knew what we were doing every time, and we never made him uncomfortable. With like Fears, we were doing different things to make him uncomfortable. The Missouri game, I was really, really impressed with the defensive coverages, because I thought we were masterful in the way that we defended in that game, because guys were just always in the right spot. We changed up the way that we were rolling or changing the way that we were defending pick and roll. Sometimes we were warring the roll. Sometimes we weren't. And we came out with 2 wins in those games, right? Maybe wins that otherwise maybe not if we hadn't made certain adjustments. On the flip side, you look at the Illinois game. Illinois, and I don't say this in a good way or a bad way or whatever, but Illinois did not really do that, especially in the second half, like specifically with ball screen coverages. Avicic was just sitting back in a drop coverage over and over and over again. So what did Pope do? We had Owe coming off of the zoom action where Owe wants to get to the rim and stuff, right? So for a drop coverage, that's not great, because you got big boy down there kind of dropping back, sitting near the rim. Like, that's not great. So what did Pope do? Pope changed it up a little bit, and we put Kobe Barea in the zoom action, which is like, wasn't as common throughout the year. He's not quite as good of a ball handler or whatever. But then what did you see Kobe Barea do? Over and over and over again, you saw him being able to kind of pull up from 3, get into the lane, and he hit a floater a few times. Illinois made no adjustments. They just kept running that drop coverage over and over again, and Coach Pope was kind of just able to pick it apart. That's special. Like, we kind of maybe take that for granted in the moment or whatever. Not every college coach is able to do that, no matter how many wins they have or whatever. It's a tough thing to do, is make adjustments on the fly and know what you're seeing out there. And I just think later in the year, Coach Pope did an unbelievable job of that type of stuff. And I think Sean's exactly right. Yeah.
So, Spencer, when we talk about the talent growth and, the investment that, Kentucky basketball's made with this roster, like, I don't think that's something we should put lightly. They have put millions upon millions of dollars into this roster to improve talent, to improve the physicality and athleticism, and some of the things that Pope clearly saw as glaring holes last season and said, hey, we got to fix that. Let's pour money into those specific spots. How can talent growth kind of change that and kind of raise, I think the floor of the program under Mark Pope is high every single year, but how does the ceiling improve as the talent improves year after year?
Yeah. I mean, this roster in particular, I'm in love with. I really, really love the way this roster is put together, and we'll probably talk about that. But I just think no matter how good your principals are, it's just a fact that, like, the more talented, the more athletic, the more like senior that you are, kind of if you have older guys and stuff, we see it all the time. Like, Kelvin Sampson's a great example of, like, when he got to Houston, We played them when I was at OU. We played them early on when he was at Houston, and they were not great. They weren't very good. He just didn't. He was running all the right stuff. Guys were executing stuff, but the talent level just wasn't there, right? And Kelvin Sampson is, I think, a top 5 coach in college basketball easily. I think he's unbelievable. And I just think, as you've seen over the years, Kelvin Sampson is a great example of, like, as the talent grew, the floor of his team just got higher and higher. They're making the Sweet 16 and they're losing on almost a buzzer beater, Tyler Hero, you know what I mean, to a really, really talented Kentucky roster. They're getting knocked out on a true buzzer beater against Michigan. I think it was Jordan Poole that hit that shot. And then okay, now they're Elite 8 and now they're Final Four, and now they are literally a possession away from winning a national championship. You saw that floor just rise and rise and rise with a guy like Kelvin Sampson, because he got better talent. He got older. He got guys to stay in the program. Kelvin is really invested in, and this is what I love about Coach Pope. Your number one recruiting job is to keep talent here, especially nowadays in the transfer portal and everything is more important than ever. And Kelvin Sampson has made a real effort in that. And I think Coach Pope's following the same model where he's like, we've got great guys. We need to keep them here, because that's how you build a program. That's not how you build a roster. Like, Coach Pope isn't interested necessarily in building a roster. He's interested in building a program, which is year over year, having consistency, having continuity, having principles and stuff that you don't need to reteach every year. And I think he's done a masterful job of that. And I think this team is so talented, so athletic. I think that they have so many different ways to hurt you that, and again, like I said, we'll talk about it, but I just think the floor of this team is incredibly high. And I don't know if media is quite giving it the credit that it deserves, at least from my standpoint.
I guess let's go straight into that then, especially with the returning talent, because I think, fans have the familiarity there, and then we'll transition into the newcomers. Where are you seeing the jumps with the Colin Chandlers and the Otega Oways and Trent Noahs and Brandon Garrisons, and how can that kind of change what the ceiling looks like for this next, like, where do you see the specific jumps coming from each of those 4?
Yeah, I think there's a comfortability and a confidence that comes with, like, hey, I've done this before. This is great. I think Coach Pope is also a master at getting his guys to believe in themselves. Like, I've never been a part of one of his programs, but you can kind of feel that. You can feel that from the press conferences, from the interviews, from the energy around the program. I think those guys having a year under their belt and being able to kind of teach these new guys the ropes. I mean, you got Jalen Lowe calling Trent Noah the greatest shooter he's ever seen. I mean, I don't know if I'd go that far. I don't know. I mean, we'll see. Trent Noah, I think, is incredibly talented. Keeping those guys around is incredibly important. I think out of that group, Colin Chandler has the ability to make the most, like the biggest leap, I think, because he's so athletic. I told somebody the other day, and I think that they looked at me sideways, but it makes sense in my mind. I see Colin Chandler in a lot of the same light that I saw DeAndre Liggins. Ooh. A guy who got on the floor initially because of his defense, because he's long, because he can switch, because he could just stick to a guy and just guard him. You're like, Colin, just go out there. Don't worry about anything else. Don't worry about scoring. Just go guard that guy. Give it 100% effort. And that's how DeAndre Liggins started out. He wasn't on the court because of his offense. He wasn't on the court because he was some incredible passer, ball handler. He was on the court because he was a defensive guy. And then the progression that you saw with DeAndre Liggins all the way to hitting the game-winning three-pointer in the corner against North Carolina to go to our first Final Four in 13 years. I mean, that's literally the stuff of movies, I think, and it doesn't quite get talked about enough. I think Colin Chandler is going to be really similar in, like, he's a great athlete, just like Liggins. He gets on the court initially because of his defense and his hustle and his length and just his ability to disrupt. But then I think his offense is going to come. And you already saw that late in the year. And so I think he's the one that has the biggest opportunity to make a jump where you're like, we have to put this guy on the court. You know what I mean? Colin's down there. We have to play him. He's too good not to play. And I think that's the position he's going to be in. Otega just has to round out his jumper. He's got so many of the tools and intangibles. He needs to round out his jumper. I think you and Sean have talked about that, I think, a fair amount, but, like, that's obviously the biggest thing for him. And then Trent Noah. He's the Mountain Mamba.
The greatest shooter of all time.
He's the greatest shooter of all time. He's the Mountain Mamba. Like, he's going to be a guy that if we can keep him for 4 years, he's going to be a guy that we look back at and we're just like, he had an excellent career. It might not come together this year just because his roster is so talented. Like, he might have to choose his spots, but then I think he'll be set up where next year he's gonna get a role, kind of like Derek Willis or something, maybe, where it's like he just carves out a role where it's like and obviously they're very different players, but they can both shoot the ball and stuff. But I just think being homegrown talent, waiting their turn, picking their spots. Derek Willis had great moments early on in his career too. Some like his sophomore and his junior year, but then his senior year, it kind of all came together. I could see Trent Noah having a similar type of of impact a little bit later in his career. I'm really impressed with the holdovers from this roster. I just think, and then Brandon Garrison is Brandon Garrison. Like, I love the running joke of, well, how does this impact Brandon Garrison? What does this mean for Brandon Garrison? For anybody who's not on KS Board, you should join. It's fun.
See, that's exactly
a little selfless plug. Yeah, I think Brandon Garrison has a chance to really and we'll talk about this maybe with roster building, and I'd love to get Sean's take, but I think Brandon Garrison has a chance to be a perfect complement to Quaintance. I think that they're just different enough from one another that they could be perfect complementary pieces. So I'm really pumped to see where BG goes as well.
I think so too. I think they're just different enough that the game plan has to change a little bit for the opponent, depending on which one's on the floor. And his growth in year 2 in this program, I think is very impactful for what this team can be. But when Quaintance is healthy, I think they got a really nice 1-2 punch there. I guess the one thing I would ask you, and just your thoughts, is when you're blending, if you have any concerns, regardless of how much talent you have, just from a coaching side of this, when you're blending so many new faces in, I think you obviously have a question there of like, how does this naturally blend together the way that it did the year before with so many new faces? But how impactful do you think it is that you got guys that have been in programs like Mo Diabate, Denzel Aberdeen, that have been those role guys, that they're not going to demand as much coming here because I think they're already prepared to take on a greater role, but they've been kind of that guy that would sacrifice things for their teams previously that have had great success in the tournament, national championships, Final Fours. How much does that help, that those are kind of those veteran pieces that will just kind of do whatever it takes, you think?
I think it's huge. I think those are 2 of my favorite signings. I was all in on what was the kid's name? Wilkerson, the kid who ended up going to Indiana. I was pumped. I was like, oh, we got him in the bag. And now you look, 2 weeks later and you're like, well, we didn't get him, but that ended up being okay, because look who we got. We got Aberdeen. I really, really like Aberdeen. I think Aberdeen's really talented. I love guys that come into programs with an identity already built. And Mo Diabate is a guy in particular who, like, he knows who he is as a basketball player, and his goal is to be the best at it. He wants to be an absolute hound of a defender. He wants to be bigger and stronger than you are. He wants to muscle you out of the paint. He wants to be able to put his head down and you're not going to be able to stop him. Like, that's a guy who has an identity already formed, and he knows what it takes to be a part of a winning program and to win in March. He's been to an Elite 8 and a Final Four. Like, that's experience that's invaluable. And then you got a guy like Aberdeen as well, who he came off the bench, but he played huge minutes. He is one of the sole reasons that they came back against Texas Tech. He had a stretch against Texas Tech. That was great. Mostly defensively, honestly, even more than offensively. He was spectacular in that game, I thought. Just straight up, Florida does not win the national championship if Denzel Aberdeen does not play the minutes that he plays and play as well as he played, no matter how good Walter Clayton was. And I think that says a lot. And again, he's a guy who's coming in and he knows his identity and he's ready to do it. And he wants to do it at a really high level. So I think guys like that are like invaluable. So I love those signings. And then you get guys who are still finding their way a little bit, but the ceiling is unbelievably high, like a Jaden Quaintance or something like that, right? Or a Jalen Lowe. Like, he's still finding his way through it just a little bit. He's trying to get more efficient and stuff, but you're like, man, the bones are there where you could be really, really good. So yeah, I really like those 2 signings. And I think those 2 signings are similar to like the Lamont Butler, where it's like, this guy knows who he is and he's coming here to be the best at it. I love that type of a player. And I think it really rounds the roster out really nicely.
Yeah. I mean, you need those guys that steady you, right? They steady you with a defensive stop. They steady you with a rebound, an offensive rebound to put back. And I feel like that those are those guys that are going to do those things. I guess of some of these other guys, Jalen Lowe, Jaden Quaintance, Cam Williams, that you view as having obviously a lot of upside to their game. Is there one of them that you're watching the most that you think kind of pops here that is going to reach that level? To me, it's Jalen Lowe. I think that his game is going to be cleaned up a lot better playing with better talent, that some of the turnovers, the shot selection, all those things I think are going to naturally improve with a better understanding of the game in this program and playing with greater talent.
Yeah, I like Jalen Lowe a lot. I think JQ is the one for me defensively that I'm like, okay, as we all saw with Anthony Davis, or even a guy like Willie Cauley-Stein, even Nick Richards to a point, like we saw some of these guys where it's like, okay, a big guy back there who's protecting the rim at an elite level, that solves a lot of problems. That cures a lot of ailments defensively. Like, a guy can blow a coverage or whatever. It's like, we're good. We got Nerlens Noel back there. And I think JQ can be that type of guy where it's like, all of a sudden we can be more aggressive. We can take a little bit more risk. We kind of know we have a kind of a delete button back there behind us who can really help. And I think JQ could be that guy. I think he needs to be a little bit more disciplined with where he is on the court and stuff, but his instincts are so good, at least from what I've seen. So I really, really like that signing. I think Jalen Lowe is a guy who's incredibly talented. He's going to be our number one playmaker for sure. He's going to be the guy who kind of stirs the drink and stuff when he's on the court. Where I think I want to see him progress, because obviously, like, we know about the efficiency stuff. Like, yeah, we want him to become more efficient. I think he's going to have a Lamont Butler type of growth where he becomes a lot more efficient, just like Butler did. I think for him, defensively is where I probably need to see the biggest growth from him, because I'm looking at a roster where I'm like, late in the game, you know, you're on the road at, you know, Florida or at Tennessee or Vanderbilt or something, and you're down by 3, you're up by 3, whatever, you know, there's 4 or 5 minutes left. You need guys on the court who can consistently get stops and who you can lean on. I would need, if I was the head coach of Kentucky, which I never will be, but if I was, I would say I need 5 guys on the court who can do both at a really, really high level. So Jalen Lowe, his progression that I want to see the most is defensively. I would want him to be like incredibly sound defensively. You don't need to be the greatest defender in the world, but you can't be a liability. You need to be able to hold your own, and you need to be a pretty solid defender at the top. And otherwise, I think we're going to see late in games. I think we'll see Aberdeen running the point because we know what kind of a defender he is. So with Lowe, I'm really excited about him for his playmaking and stuff. I think the biggest thing that I want to see from him is on the defensive side of the ball. But I just think his passing, his IQ, I love his personality, the little bit that I've seen. Like, it seems like he's a fun guy and excited to be here. He's picking up golf, apparently. I saw him looking for golf clubs to play with the team. Like, I love that type of stuff. So I think Jalen Lowe is going to be a really impactful signing, yeah.
How can you see Denzel elevating his game, you know, beyond just, I was 6th man on a national championship team, clearly wanting a specific role that he wasn't promised or expected to get at Florida or whatever? You know, how do you see him kind of taking ownership of that elevated role? And, you know, is he capable of that? You know, you invested a lot in him, hoping that he could become that, but what are the steps that he has to take to become that?
Yeah, I think he can absolutely, like you saw, I think I saw a stat. He started 4 or 5 games in league play for Florida, and he averaged like 15 points and, you know, some odd assist or whatever. Like, that's great. That's what you love to see, a guy who gets an opportunity and takes advantage of it. I think the biggest thing that I really like about Aberdeen, that, like, when I look at the Wilkerson kind of situation that unfolded and now we got Aberdeen, the reason I think we came out way ahead in that is this past season, and Sean and Jack both, I think you guys would both agree, like, playmaking was a problem for us. Playmaking specifically for others, playmaking just in general. When Lamont went out, it was like, every possession felt like, how are we going to get a good look? And we did, you know, credit to Coach Pope and stuff. We got good looks, but it didn't quite come naturally. You didn't have a guy spraying the ball around and getting into the lane and kind of being a mouse in the house and causing problems and making defenses collapse. Before the Aberdeen signing, I looked at our roster and I said, okay, as of right now, I think Jalen Lowe is the only guy still that is that type of a player who can really get in there and disrupt in the center and the heart of a defense and then make plays for others and stuff. Oweh can do it to a point a little bit. You know, Colin Chandler showed some passing ability and stuff, but, like, who's a guy who's really good at it? So when I look at Aberdeen, I look at a guy who I'm like, next year he could be a supreme playmaker, because he got to do that some at Florida, but he didn't get to do it as much because, you know, you got arguably the best guard in college basketball running your show. You know, and Richard and stuff was really good, and Martin. But I think, give him a little bit more time, put the ball in his hands a little bit more. I think he could be really disruptive on defenses by just being a playmaker. And sometimes that play is going to be for himself, but a lot of times it's going to be for others. I think if he wants to take a step forward, it's got to be like focusing on truly just disrupting defenses. And then, yeah, he's got to be a knockdown shooter. Like, this is a team where I think the fan base is kind of like, we checked every box, but, like, are we going to be able to shoot the ball the way Coach Pope wants? We need Aberdeen to be that one of those guys who's just, like, really consistent and reliable. It's like, if you get a look, you got to be able to knock it down. And I think he can absolutely do that.
And this, go ahead, Jack. If you want,
I was going to say that was my next question for you. Where is the shooting going to come from? I do feel like that's the one question that when people ask me, I think Sean the same way, like, you know, if you were to point one single flaw with this roster and wondering where, you know, there could be a flaw, a glaring hole that we look back on and go, I wish we addressed it, you know, this a little bit further. Shooting is kind of the one thing. There's potential there, but there's also potential for guys not making the steps forward or not being what we maybe hoped. You know, Denzel you want him and hope that he makes those shots, but does he consistently? Jasper, kind of one of those guys that he can be a microwave scorer, but can he consistently do it? You hope so. You think he can, but can he do that consistently for you? What do you kind of say to those kind of criticisms about this roster construction, specifically as it relates to shooting?
Yeah, it's somewhat valid, and the shooting going into the year is going to be a little bit unproven at certain spots. I think that's a valid critique. I'm not super worried about it, but I do think, as you saw with the Gators, right? Like shooting can again cure just like shot blocking on defense, like the ability to shoot the ball can cure a lot of ailments on the offensive side. I think Lowe's got he was 28%, I think, last year. Like we got to get that up into the mid 30s. We need Aberdeen to shoot the ball pretty well. It could honestly be a really, really good opportunity for guys like Noah and Chandler to get minutes. It's like, hey, we're looking up at the scoreboard. We're 8 or 9 minutes into the game. We're 0 for 6 from 3. We're trailing, 17-8 right now. Like, how can we generate some better looks and some better offense? Like, let's throw a couple guys like that out there and see what it does. Stretch the floor a little bit. It's the best way for those guys to get on the floor. Yelovich, I know very little about, but I've watched a lot of tape on Synergy, and I think he's going to be a really reliable shooter for the minutes that he does play, which is great. And then we talked about Garrison earlier. The number one way that he can complement JQ is by giving something that I don't think JQ can probably give a ton next year, which is just being able to really, really shoot the basketball. We know BG loves a good open look. We know he'll take it. We know he shoots it with confidence, whether it's going to go in or not. That's the best thing you can ask for from a guy. Is like, hey, shoot the ball with confidence. He's got that, but I think, and it looks like he's working on it this year, but we need him to become a really, really somewhat reliable shooter. He doesn't need to turn into Kyle Wiltshire, but he can't be like just a total liability out there where he's shooting 21% from 3 and all that type of stuff. So I think that there's opportunities and there's spots where collectively as a group, the sum can be greater than the whole of its parts when it comes to 3-point shooting, and we can kind of do it by committee. And to Sean's point earlier, and with roster building in particular, this roster is built where the defense is going to have to defend the same position multiple ways, depending upon who's on the court.
Yeah. And
so you put defenses in really uncomfortable situations with that. So if you have 5, 6, 7 guys that are at least somewhat involved in the rotation, they're all somewhat in the mid 30s to upper 30s of shooting, you become a lot more dangerous, even though you're like, none of those guys are individually like incredible shooters. And the Gators are a perfect example of that. They shot 38, 39% from 3. But when you played the Gators, you felt like everybody can shoot the ball. Like, we got to be scrambling like crazy. We got to be running around. That's the feeling that you had when you played them. And even though none of them were like incredible, like Steph Curry type shooters, you look at the year that they had and you're like, that was a big part of their offense, was just putting enough guys on the court who were threats. And that lended itself to big moments and big shots from some of those guys, which was really fun.
And two, like, to me, like if they, would you trade more volume for like a 2% dip in average from 3-point range? Because this team, I feel, is going to be able to get the ball, by a defender's hip. They're going to be able to get in the paint. They're going to be able to get, more, draw another defender and get some open looks. But at the same time, I think this team's going to be better offensive rebounding. I think they're going to be able to make some of those plays at the rim. They're going to be able to get out in transition. Some of those other areas that maybe this team won't shoot it as well efficiency-wise, but the volume that Mark Pope wants to get to is probably equally as important, right?
I love that. I love you said that, because it's exactly right. Like, I feel way better about the volume if I know we've got dudes down there who can rebound and spray it back out or put it back up. Like, that's the type of winning plays that teams can make. And when that's happening, I think the volume is a really, really good thing. If I feel like, hey, we're one and done every time down right now because we're not really a threat on the offensive glass, that's when I'm like, volume is not everything, because you're shooting a lower percentage shot and you're having no opportunity to get second shots. So the analytics say all sorts of different things with it. But yeah, I think volume with this team in particular can be really, really great, just because I think we're going to have an unbelievable ability to rebound the ball. I think like Mo Diabate and stuff in particular. And when I talk about roster building, I look at teams first and foremost who can beat other teams in a variety of ways. And last year, I don't think I would put us in that category. That's why I think we had a ceiling of about Sweet 16. Even with all the hype and we beat Duke and we did all this kind of stuff, as we got into March, I'm like, I still kind of knew we had a ceiling, because it felt like we could only beat teams one way. And that was if shots were falling and, somebody was in a groove and that type of stuff. Like, that was kind of our way of beating people. You look at teams like Florida, Duke, Auburn, Alabama 2 years ago, they could beat people in a myriad of ways. If shots weren't falling, they're crushing you on the offensive glass. When they're crushing you on the offensive glass, they're kicking it back out, and they have guards that were good enough to kind of get back into the paint and make things happen. Shots aren't falling at all, so they're just going to suffocate you defensively. Duke had plenty of nights last year where offensively they were just okay, but they were so good defensively that they beat people by 15 points anyways because they were just that good. You could say the same about the Anthony Davis team. Like there were nights where they only scored like 62 points, but it was 62-47 because they were so good defensively. They could beat people in a variety of ways. Last year, we couldn't do that. This year, I think we can beat people in a bunch of different ways in transition from three, getting to the rim with some of our guards, rebounding the ball at an extremely high rate. And then I think defensively, this team has the bones to be incredible, like especially compared to last year. So I think you've got 5 or 6 different ways that you can look and you're like, we could win a game just by any one of those ways, where last year was a lot more limited, I think.
We working through the roster, we haven't gotten to the freshmen yet. Just what do you like about the, 2 Kentuckian additions that, kind of Pope opted to go that direction over, Braylon Mullins versus Jasper Johnson and, Eric Reeby versus Malachi Moreno, kind of made some personnel decisions favoring the Kentucky boys, and then kind of came in late with a surprise with Braden Hawthorne. Just kind of, what do you think of those 3 guys? And is there a path for any of them, all of them to play year one?
I love that he's going after Kentucky kids. I mean, Sean, you can talk about this some, but like the level of Kentucky high school basketball, has it ever been this high? I mean, this is like the year-over-year output that you're looking at. Guys like Reed Shepard, Trent Noah, Travis Perry, like you've got Taylon Kinney and Stokes, like 2 years, or I guess that would be just next year. Like Sean every night is up against it, going against like, I mean, the talent in high school basketball in Kentucky is crazy. And I did get to watch the highlights of Sean, your game. Yeah, I think it was the regional final that you guys played Malachi's team in an unbelievable game in a super, super cool environment. I really like those signings. Jasper, I'm not sure about. It's so hard to gauge with like the OTE and stuff. Like it's hard for me to gauge kind of without seeing him more up close, how much of an impact he can have, because we've seen mixed results from that league. Obviously we have Rob Dillingham, who was like spectacular, but we have other results where it's like they don't mesh as well and blend as well. And I look at Jasper and I'm like, okay, he's pretty small, kind of like Dillingham. How does he use that? I think there's still some that remains to be seen. He could come in and light it up, and he could be incredible. He could come in and maybe it's not his time, and he gets his NIL dollars and gets a lot of really good experience, and he's ready to go as a sophomore. He's really hard for me to gauge. I think Malachi, if we weren't already so loaded at the 5 and even at the 4, I think absolutely, like, I think he's good. I think Malachi's really, really good. We're just with JQ and BG, I just think we're already so good at that spot. It's a really good opportunity for a guy like Malachi to just absorb it, just like be there, absorb it. Can he crack the rotation? 100%. Like I'm not with these guys every day. I don't see that. So who knows? I didn't think Reed Shepard was going to do what he did. Like, like it goes to show you, it's a bit of a crapshoot sometimes when you're not with them every day. You just kind of have no idea. But my guess for Malachi would be that he's a little bit of a backseat this year. Hopefully we're winning a bunch of games by a lot of points. There's opportunities to get him in the rotation, get valuable minutes. I think he's really, really talented. And I think he could be a guy that we really lean on the following year. I'm just not sure he gets in there a ton this year, but who knows? Like, we'll see. Same with Hawthorne. I'm like, what a great building block for the future. All 3 of these guys. And these are guys who I'm like, in other programs, I would be like, why are you taking that kid? He's just gonna transfer, and the fruits of your labor are going to go benefit, somebody else. They're going to go to West Virginia, or they're going to go to Cincinnati, or they're going to go somewhere else, and they're going to get to benefit from the hard work that you put into that kid this year. At Kentucky now, I don't worry about that because Pope has put such a premium on we're going to get talent and we're going to keep it. Like, because that's like what we talked about at the beginning. We're going to keep talent here. I really love that approach, and I think I have supreme confidence that the staff is going to keep those guys. If they're not ready this year, great, but I have confidence that they're going to keep those guys. And again, we're not building rosters, we're building a program. And I think that those guys are building blocks that are huge. So if they crack the rotation, excellent. That means that we're better than I even could have possibly imagined, and I love it. They absolutely have a chance to. If they don't, not the end of the world. We're super talented at all those spots. And again, it's just building blocks, and I've got faith that they're going to come back and be a part of the roster the following year.
Yeah, I'd kind of been comparing that the Braden Hawthorne to just like Grant Derbyshire, where it's like if he transfers out at the end of the year, then he was a glorified walk-on who was the best scout team, Grant Nelson, whatever, just kind of weird unicorny, like, hey, we need to throw a different look out there. Braden, that's on you for scout team. So like at absolute worst, at absolute best, he turns into the pro that this staff genuinely believes that he is. And I've heard great things about him early, just kind of being whoa, that's a different look. He's longer and, more skilled than anything really we have on this roster. And I just wonder if I'm not expecting it, but I just kind of have maybe we get to a game in late November and we're like, we just need something weird. We need something different out there. And Pope calls on Braden to be the guy, and he ends up, hitting a big 3 or 2, or, getting a Pope stealing transition and dunk on the other end, something to just kind of light that fuse. I think he has that possibility. Another thing I'm monitoring pretty closely is that first month, as we kind of are still in TBD territory with Jaden Quaintance and his return to injury, and how loaded that early part of the schedule is for Malachi to step in and kind of take those, kind of Brandon Garrison from last year minutes. Like, I do wonder if there's a path where he steps in those situational moments, thrives, and then it kind of gets to the point where Pope's like, well, I can't take him off the floor. As much as I love Quaintance, like, hey, it's going to lead to a complicated kind of front court mess for Pope that it's good. You want more talent. You want more, like, I want him to have to make tougher decisions because of Malachi's play. And I think the path is going to be there, because as optimistic as they have been about Jaden playing initially, I think Pope will want to play it as cautiously as possible. That will open the door to, a month or so or whatever, to make sure Jaden is absolute 100%. That just kind of opens the door to Malachi as your backup center for, the first couple weeks, maybe a month of the season.
Yeah, I love that take, because it's kind of like what I said about Colin Chandler earlier, where it's like, you just want to be in a spot where your coach is looking down the bench and you're like, we have to put him in. He's too good not to. Like, we got because sometimes substitution patterns on the bench can be, they're happening fast and loose, and coaches do it different ways. Like, some head coaches are like, I'm going to be the only one to sub. The way that we did it in South Florida, we had an associate, Tom Harrion, who he was the one moving guys. And if he ran past BG, Brian Gregory, and BG didn't like it, he'd say, what are you doing, Tom? Get him back. So there was some of that. It's fast and it's loose, and you're throwing guys in there, and you got to have supreme confidence when you look down. Maybe BG, for instance, has been scored on twice in a row, and you're like, and he screwed up that coverage in the middle. Malachi, come on, like, get in there. And then Malachi goes in there and gives us 6 or 7 really, really great minutes, gets a block, gets a couple buckets, a free throw. That's how you really build that type of stuff. And like I was kind of saying earlier, I love when you don't just want to be able to win games in different ways. You want to be able to win matchups in different ways as well. So when a guy has been guarding like Otega Owe for 20 minutes, and then you throw a guy like Braden Hawthorne out there, and it's like, whoa, who's this praying mantis that I've got to run around the court and chase, and he's going to make me pay if I'm not right up in his grill. I was kind of sitting down and trying to get up underneath Otega Owe, and now I'm running around chasing this guy around. Like, that's different. Like, that throws me off my game as a defender. A really good example of that from the title team was like Kyle Wilcher subbing in for Terrence Jones. Like, you could not have 2 different players. But as a defender, I'm like totally thrown off. I'm like, shoot, I was banging around down low, dropping shoulders and stuff with Terrence Jones, and now I got to chase this guy around. Otherwise, he's gonna pop one, like, and make me pay. And like, that's what really puts defenses in a blender, where you're just, as a defender, after 40 minutes, you're just like, ugh. Jasper Johnson, Braden Hawthorne, Malachi, they all offer slightly different things than what guys who are maybe number 1 at that position offer, and that's super fun as a coach to be able to just say, let's throw him out there and let's switch the way the defense is having to play. Let's put them on their toes a little bit.
We'll start wrapping this thing up. It puts you on the spot on, take off your homer hat, and who is the guy that you maybe are not the highest on, have the most questions about, need to see more of, is kind of, other people have bought in, pushing all their chips in, and I'm like, I'm not quite there yet. Hopefully for, a guy who's kind of penciled into the rotation, somebody that fans are expecting to be kind of a, difference maker for this team.
It's a good question. I think, not to be a little bit repetitive, and please, if anybody is listening who knows him, please don't be mad at me, but I think Jasper Johnson's a guy that I just want to see. I'm not 100% sure. I just think guys who are as kind of small and shifty and crafty as him, like he's super fun to watch. But I just think the adjustments that it takes to be in a really, really physical SEC and playing teams like Louisville and Gonzaga and stuff in the non-conference, I just think that's a big adjustment to make. And I don't know if Jasper can make it. He looked a little overwhelmed in the what was it? It was the Team USA versus the World. What do they call that out in Portland?
Summit, yeah, Hoop Summit.
Now, to his credit, he didn't get much of a fair shake as far as minutes and stuff go. But I thought the minutes that he did play, he seemed to be a little bit overwhelmed by the size and stuff and the length of the World team. Again, I haven't seen him a ton, so that's a guy that I'm just like, okay, I'm going to put a pin in it. I want to come back to it a little bit later. The other one's Yelovich. I just think European guys sometimes come out and they're great. I think a lot of times they have real big growing pains. We saw the highs and lows of Big Z. The highs were incredible. The Georgia game, behind the back pass, all that. Like Z,
all-time moment.
All-time game. I mean, all-time, probably the greatest Georgia game ever in the history of Rupp Arena. It's got to be that one, I would think. Super, super fun. But then you also saw a lot of growing pains, and there's a lot of like the international game is so different than the U.S. game and the physicality and stuff that he's going to see. So I don't really know how he's going to. I've seen people be like, this kid is a solidified first-round pick. I don't know if I would go that far. I'm thinking he's a multi-year guy. I think he's definitely going to be in the rotation. He's definitely going to see minutes, probably 12, 14, 16 minutes a game. That's my opinion, but I've been wrong about the majority of the basketball takes I've had in my life. So he'll probably be the opposite, but I think those are the two guys that I'm looking out for a little bit more closely.
And I'd say like Jasper has the perfect, person to follow with Rob Dillingham as a guy that had the same questions. I mean, we were on this show, having people from OTE say there's no chance this dude makes it at Kentucky. He's going to get swallowed up by the physicality. He's going to get swallowed up by the moment and the spotlight and all of the things, that's why I felt bad. But in real time, it's like, I am hearing nothing good about this kid. Like not one person believes that Rob Dillingham will make it at Kentucky and it becomes a top 10 pick. So it's like at worst, he has somebody to look at and say, hey, I am following in his footsteps. There were the same criticisms, kind of skeptics about him, and he proved those naysayer wrongs. Here's my path to doing so, as well as similar players, not maybe not as on ball as Rob was, but build and, shot maker and things like that. So I get it. I totally understand. And I see a lot of that. And I've told a lot of people that when they ask like, hey, how good is Jasper? What can he be? It's like, I think that I have a hard time believing that that he can be okay this year at Kentucky. I think long-term, I think he's gonna be good, but I think that there is either a path where it's like, whoa, he's not ready yet. It's going to be, it's going to be a minute for him, or he becomes a lottery pick. Like, I just don't see a path year one for him to be like, hey, he's pretty good, but needs some fine tuning, and could, if he were to go in the draft right now, be a early second round, maybe slide into the late first. Like, I don't see that in between path for Jasper. I think he's going to be either awesome or very, very clearly a work in progress. Let's put a pin in this and circle back next year. So I don't know. I totally get. Sean, is there anybody that you are kind of circling and are kind of waiting and seeing on?
Jasper's been mine as well, just because I feel like Kentucky has so much at positions on the perimeter that I think that if he's not ready right out of the gate, then I think Kentucky still has enough to accomplish everything that they want. Now, if he's able to contribute and live up to some of that stuff initially, then I think Kentucky can be even better than what I think they can be. So that's how I view it. Now, I know he can make a jump shot. I know that he's quick. He can do some things. But what is the role going to be? If he ends up being 8th, 7th, 8th, 9th man, this team's got a chance to be really, really good.
Yeah, I totally agree. So anything else that we want to touch on, Sean, before we wrap this thing up?
And I feel like we've covered everything. Unless you can get something else.
Spencer, is there anything you want to get off your chest before we wrap up?
No, you guys are great. I love Sources Say. You guys are fun to watch. Like I said at the beginning, this is kind of like meeting little mini celebrities for me, which is super cool. I think my overall thing with this team is I think this offseason is taking forever. I think Kentucky fans should be ready. I'm at the point with this team, and again, I'm irrational and I'm a Kentucky fan, but I'm at the point with this team where when I see preseason rankings from CBS or from whatever, and Kentucky's not in like the top 6, I'm getting irrationally angry because I'm like, I love this roster so much, and I think this roster is so deep and can hurt people in so many ways that I think it's going to be a really fun year. So I hope Cats fans are excited. I know obviously a lot of commitment and money and dollars and stuff went into it, which is great. I think Pope and them did an unbelievable job. So I'm literally counting down the weeks and the days until the season tips off on the 3rd or 4th of November. Mm-hmm. I'm like, I can't wait. Like, let's rock and roll. I think it's going to be a fun year. So I hope Cats fans are ready.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I hope we can continue to do this and, kind of turn you into a regular if you're open for it. I've had a blast doing this today, and if that's something you want to do, I think this would be a lot of fun. I'm sure fans are certainly appreciating this as well. So you nailed your debut.
Wow, thanks. I appreciate it. Let's wait for the comments and all that. We'll see if people actually like me and wait for the reviews to come in. But it was really fun. Like, I love talking hoops. Since I got out of basketball, I'm just constantly looking for ways to be plugged into it. I've rediscovered my fandom. Being back out of it when you're coaching in it, it's kind of hard to keep it because you're so busy doing your own stuff and you're on flights and you're doing this and that, and you're not really able to totally engross yourself in the teams. I'm all the way back in on my Kentucky fandom, which is super, super fun. So yeah, let's rock and roll.
Yeah, absolutely. But before we get out of here, Optimal Living Services partners with clients to increase their awareness of issues and empowers them to develop the skills to manage these challenges. We believe that every individual has obstacles they'll need to face, and that the services our team provides will give hope to all of our clients. Every individual has the ability to grow from their problems, whether it's substance abuse, mental health, work, finance, or emotional struggles. We help clients learn from their potential and join them in their journey. You can head to optimallivingservices.com to learn more about their services and meet their staff. You can also give them a call at 859-785-1030. Spencer, how can fans find your work? What's the, is there a way to follow along with your newfound re-energized fandom?
There's really not. I don't really have a good page or whatever. I do have a Twitter, but I never post from it. So honestly, it's not worth following. Maybe I should do that though. Maybe if I do this a little bit more, maybe I'll develop something, but none of my work is worth following right now. Just listen to me or not on Sources Say occasionally, maybe, and that'll be that. Yeah.
Sean, what about you?
It's _ Coach S. Smith.
Look at you nailing it without needing it up.
I need a graphic.
You can find me on Twitter as well at Jack Pilgrim KSR. Go subscribe to KSR Plus. I believe we're like a couple dozen subscribers on YouTube away. So Steven's on the cusp of getting fired. Close, maybe not. We're right on the right close to 50,000. So make sure you go subscribe there and make sure Steven gets to keep his job, because if not, then we're not going to have somebody to produce this show, and then Sources Say goes away. So that'd really suck. Appreciate Spencer coming on, man. That was an absolute blast, Sean. As always, we had a blast, and let's keep this thing rolling. I had a lot of fun. For Jack, for Spencer, for Sean, we'll see you next time. Go Cats.